Welcome back to the Deal Room, everyone. We've got another great episode lined up for you today. Now, if you haven't watched any of the other episodes in the series, I suggest you wind your way back to, what have we done, like 4 or 5 of these things now? I've lost count. But we've taken you through the path that comes about when you look at buying a technology or a product company. And the things about the work that we do, which is around technical due diligence, some of the mindset of people looking at buying companies, and all sorts of things like that. So if you haven't watched it so far, go back, watch it. You've got to binge watch the entire series here. But we're talking today about technical due diligence and what's actually involved with particularly the software asset. Andrew, you're our expert here.
Sure.
Take us through some of it.
Yeah, look, I mean, some of the key things that we look for, I guess, fundamentally, it's the architecture and the code actually matter. You may think that because this is the actual product. This is what you are buying in a technology company. Look, how well that's structured, how the code's licensed, that can have a massive impact on the actual value of what you're buying, both immediately and going forward, and also whether you can actually meet the goals you're actually trying to achieve by buying this company.
So licensing, why is that important?
Look, licensing is one of those things that can massively impact the value of the company. The reason being, almost all companies use open source software where they have access to the source of something and can incorporate it into their product.
But there's a right way and a wrong way.
That's right, because if you do it the right way, all is good. You've got a highly valuable asset that can then be purchased. If you do it the wrong way, what you're getting ready to spend millions or hundreds of millions of dollars on may actually be something you have to give away to the world for free.
And that's not blowing things out of proportion. That is actually a potential risk that if open source is not used properly, you can trigger licensing that actually does require companies to release their IP.
Absolutely, and that's inbuilt to some of the key licensing schemes, like the GNU public license. That's one of its goals, to ensure that software is free from the encumbrances of copyright. This is something that is very much goes back to a lot of the philosophy of some of the key open source contributors in the earlier history of open source, and it's something that you really need to be careful about.
Tell us about source code analysis.
What we do there is we actually look at, for those who may not be aware, source code is what a software product is actually made of.
Good point.
This is what actually tells it, when you click on this button or do something, it tells it what to do. Mm-hmm. And how it's the lot. That is actually the core, that is how you create this product. So what we do when we're analysing that is, first up, before we even get to the code, source code exists in the context, which is what the architecture is. That's the overall design or blueprint of how this software is going to work. And that software plus the architecture, that is the product. This is what you are buying. So first up, we actually will gather the engineering team and we'll talk with them to understand what the architecture is. First off, is there even one documented? I know I've been in some diligences where the activities and discussions we're having is the first time this has actually been documented and put on the board. So this is where the actual team, they're gathering and saying, oh yeah, this actually does this. No, you got this here, this here. It's one of the first times where all of these things actually come together. Of course, in a more mature company, you would expect that to be more formalized. But if you're buying an early stage company, one we're in a rapid growth phase, then this often may be the first time this is actually being documented.
Well, it's one of my favorite parts of the review when engineers are talking to engineers. And I mean, I like the marketing side of tech, and I like PowerPoints, I like creating them, I like consuming them. But here we're talking about engineer talking to engineer. It has different flavour altogether.
Yeah, exactly, because engineers are very, having been an engineer most of my life, the standards and what is considered important are often very different to what is considered important in the marketing world. Accuracy, almost blunt truthfulness are key attributes which are valued. And that's where we can learn an awful lot about how a product actually works. Warts and all, you will learn the details of what it actually does. The way we do that is, so once we've got that architecture understood, we will go through what I like to call a code tour, where one of the engineers will go through and walk me through, all right, well, this is how we would do things like, this is how we add a new user to a system, this is how somebody logs in, or this is how it does a transaction, and show me all the different pieces of the code and the architecture that get touched when that's happened. So that gives us an idea to actually work out how much of this is really real or not.
So talk about source code access. Yeah. How do you get given access to the source code?
It's one of those things that varies quite a lot according to the company, and I've had to deal with lots of different variations over the years, because understandably this is the company's core asset in many different ways. So what you need, I've had every variation of, here you go, here's the code on a USB stick, just make sure you don't do anything bad with it, to here's a computer in our office which is not connected to the internet, use that, to
Code chaperone?
A code chaperone, or an arm's length tour where an engineer from the company will be stepping me through different things where they are driving the computer. Other times I've had remote access to a computer on the other side of the world where I just get a chance to look at the code over a few hours while folks such as Adam and Luke are working with the rest of the team.
That's the divide and conquer strategy. So what Andrew's referring to there is you can have a management track, and we'll be exploring lots of really interesting topics, and at the same time that frees up the lead engineers to talk in a different strata of conversation, and it can unearth very productive insights.
Yeah, and it's one of those, and there is that like difference of focus and emphasis as we get to this level of code and detail. It often means that we will get access to the engineers unsupervised, so to speak, where they are actually without the executive oversight / interruption
the executive interpreting and
exactly
re-explaining, clarifying,
yes.
and stage management. Okay, so there can be this gap between the product vision. We're going to explore this in another episode as well, but we're trying to distill, what does the product do today? What is the quality of the product? What's got you here today?
Yeah, look, and that's when we speak about in the product side, that is what, believe it or not, one of the most difficult things to actually ascertain. Where a product is today, where it is will be, because technology companies are moving so quickly, and sure, it doesn't do that yet, but it will do that in a few months. Getting clarity about that is surprisingly difficult in a lot of situations, because the team you're working with, they're focused on the future and what's going to be in the product, not where it is. And so it's really difficult to get that. And so through discussions with the engineers and working through the code, that's where you get that concrete, this is what it does.
And we'll also typically take a slice of code that's the current released product, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at that point in time when we're doing the review. And we don't just look at, and so when we look at the code, we look at it for a variety of things, like its complexity level, how modular it is, which means sort of how well broken up is it. So it means I can change something over here without then breaking this thing over here. All of that then leads to an idea about how maintainable or not this product is. And a key byproduct of doing all of this is that I'm getting a chance to talk to the team in a really deep level and understanding what they know, their capabilities and their passion. And that's one of those other areas that makes all the difference to the value of the company going forward. You may have the key team who are, the people who are the founders, they've been there for years, they understand what's going on, or you may have folks who are the caretakers, they don't really know the guts of it, they know the outer shell of what's going on, who may have difficulty in growing the product, all of which may impact you as an acquirer if you then want to go and evolve and grow this thing.
So one of the other things we often look for is it's hidden away in the source code control.
If I've got, for example, 3 people working, or 3 or 30, 300 working on a piece of software, source code control lets them do that in a way so they don't step on each other's toes. It means that I do my bit, Luke does his bit, Adam does his bit, and we have a nice history, and they don't disturb each other. A good byproduct of that is you work out who's worked on the product for the entire history of the company.
It's like the revision history of the asset base, right? And you'll be able to help us get informed and share it with the HR work stream. Who are the key contributors? What areas of the code are they contributing to? And from first-hand knowledge, what are they like? We can also see productivity rates and how that's fluctuated over time.
Yeah, exactly. And all of this gives you an indication as to how suitably equipped this team is to take this thing going forward for you.
And what about search criteria? Like you do certain searches right on the source code. What sort of things do you?
One thing, of course, is a profanity filter, which just checks the language in the code.
All right, so lesson learned.
Yep.
Be careful of swear words through the code. But
Other examples are things like to-dos. Now, this is a common thing where you put in a to-do. Yeah, I'll get back to that later. Now, ultimately, writing software is an incredibly difficult, mentally taxing activity, done in a context of where you're constantly trying to balance how long it's going to take, what I'm going to do, and the quality level you want. You need to balance all of these things. You can never get all three. So where to-dos kick in is that I may skip doing this particular piece here because it's not something that's immediately urgent to what I'm actually working through. Of course, the trouble is that as time goes on, these may accumulate, and the importance of each of those to-dos is something which often needs more digging into to determine if something is actually really important or it only affects this person once every 5 years on a Thursday or something weird like that.
So we love these. Okay, edge cases. Is it a bit of code that handles an exception, error, or edge case? Is it something that relates to scalability that the team has kicked down the road that's become an accumulated tech debt that needs to be addressed? Particularly if the acquirer is looking at growing massively the usage of the platform. And that's one of the key objectives. You don't want to have an accumulated pile of backlog that's dealing with scalability and performance under load.
Yeah. Guys, great content as always, and really interesting to hear your insights, Andrew, as to how you're digging under the covers there. And I think I'm almost sensing there's probably enough content in all of this for more episodes in the future. Next episode, what I think we should focus on is more about the product due diligence. You know, what is the actual product and the technology? More product focused, how it fits into the market and that sort of thing. So we're looking forward to seeing you really soon.